have news. It's a little bit good news, kind of, and also kind of bad news. I'll let the viewer at home decide. Basically, my landlady did not have the legal authority to do what she tried to do, so I don't have to move anymore. I don't have to in a legal sense. A law was passed like a month or two prior to her attempt to get us out of the house that specifically prohibited landladies and landlords from doing like that specific thing. And I didn't know about that law. She didn't know about that law. My roommate knew about that law because he works with rental properties as his job. So I don't have to move. I probably still should, though. It got me thinking. I have a tax debt to pay down, and I can't really afford to pay down that debt in a reasonable time frame and continue living here. If I do that, then I am basically going to be making payments for almost 6 years. And during that time, I won't have any money left over for anything other than basic survival. And that doesn't really sound agreeable to me. I mean, this is already not the best place I could have possibly rented. It's a plywood box. It hasn't got wallpaper. There are other options I could pursue. I have been thinking about what my long-term goal is. I don't want to rent. I want to get out of renting. And if I move back in with my parents, for example, I also considered putting my stuff in storage and crashing with a friend or something, but then I have the recurring costs of the storage unit. My dad has a huge house. He's an engineer. Was an engineer. They bought a much bigger house than needed. There's spare rooms. I could stay there easily. They would welcome me. They would love to have me. And I would only need to stay there for about 1 year if I put aside almost all the money I get besides each month, besides what's necessary to pay car insurance. And that seems like the best option financially, but also it'd be kind of a blow to I mean, adults on the spectrum don't often make it as far as moving out. They typically are never, 80% never manage to get lasting work and self-support. So it was a big deal for me, and really was important to my self-esteem that I had managed to buck that trend and move out and self-support. So I don't want to make a huge step backwards. I don't want to regress to an earlier stage in my life. I really feel like I had turned a page in my life and I was going in a new direction I really liked. I could feel good about myself. I could date women. I mean, you can't date women when you live with your parents. What are you going to do? You going to bring them home to your parents' basement? No, it's not done. I would basically have to swear off pussy for a year if I went that route. But you know what? I've gone longer than that without it. Let's be real. Let's be absolutely fucking real here. A man who submerges hamsters is not drowning in pussy to begin with. Long-term options I've been looking at. I would like to escape rental entirely, which is easier said than done. But I've had a long history of sort of deeply investigating topics and finding alternative ways to do things that are better than what we're typically offered up front in advertising. So I feel like there's got to be a way, an overlooked way to live with as few recurring parasitic costs as possible. Like, say, an off-grid cabin or something. Building a geodesic dome or something on remote land. I would still have to be able to afford to make my own electricity. I have some solar stuff. I'd probably keep my laptop running. It'd have to all be off-grid if I want to get rid of utility payments. That would not get me out of paying property tax, however. You can't escape taxes. They get you one way or the other. It's a constant of life. You can't just live without having to pay somebody somewhere for the privilege of doing so, which really stinks. But I mean to try to find some way to get clear of as many recurring expenses as I possibly can. That's kind of what I did with the car, getting one that can drive limited distances on electric. That eliminates like 90% of my fuel expenses. If I could find a trick like that I could try to find some place to squat with a bunch of hipster bohemians, people who make art and can't support themselves doing so have done that for centuries. But then again, you get entangled in legal battles over squatters' rights, and if you win, great. You have someplace that's probably kind of a dump to live free of charge indefinitely, but if you lose, you go to prison. So that's probably not, in the Plan A list of Plan A's, or it's not up there. In other words, I'm not sure what to do. I probably will move out. I wish I had someplace else to go. There's a friend I could live with at any time, but he's got his own stuff going on, and I really don't want to impose on him. I feel like he would be fine with me living with him. I don't know if his wife would. I know my parents are always calling me, and they always want to spend time with me, and they have expressed excitement, if anything, at having me living with them again. I'm not as excited as they are. Anyway, don't be worried about me. Don't be too worried. I have financial problems. If I can keep expanding this Hampture thing and leveraging the fan base in other ways to increase my income, I think I'll be able to outrun this. I think I can negotiate a reasonable monthly payment, and this is just the minimum. I can overpay. I just need to negotiate the minimum as low as possible, just so I have the breathing room. I've already done that with the federal tax man. Now I have to deal with the state tax man and try to get that payment down as far as I can. And then hopefully, one way or the other, I'll be able to work on paying that off, just not if I live here. To continue living here would basically require almost a doubling of my income, like at least another third on top of what I'm already bringing in, and that doesn't seem like it's going to happen organically. And I don't want to beg. I'm not going to make a GoFundMe or anything, so that's off the table too. I have to plan around what I have and what I can foreseeably expect to continue bringing in over the next year or so, minimum. I mean, it could be as many as 5 years, but if I really put a lot of my income towards it and I keep doing reasonably well on Patreon, this should all be dealt with in a year. And then I'll have my rental history here to leverage in order to rent, if I want to rent again. But then again, I strongly feel like if there's any way to escape that paradigm and just either build my own cabin or on the cheapest land I can find or something similar, like that's what I ought to do. I can't survive this way. I don't know how you survive this way other than making enough money that all these expenses are really not a problem for you, and I don't foresee that. I don't see that in my future. So I need to start brainstorming ways to get by and with a quality of life that I can enjoy or at least tolerate without paying anybody rent, without paying for utilities, paying less taxes if possible. Basically as few recurring expenses as I can possibly manage. And if you have great ideas for that I haven't talked about in this video, please let me know in the comments, because I'm really trying to chart a roadmap for the next decade or so of my life, and like the number one goal in that plan, that 10-year plan, is to get to a place where I'm not paying most of my income to somebody just so that I can live indoors. And now, what you came to see. Okay, as you can see, I've filled the tub as much as I practically can. The habitat on the right is very nearly submerged. The one on the left is poking out, but that's fine. I can see through the dome to make sure that no leakage is happening. And it isn't, at least from the point where the bolt is. There's a little bit of leakage happening here, which I didn't expect. I'm going to have to line those fittings with silicone sealant after all. But it looks like when under pressure, the structure is very watertight, as I hoped it would be. I didn't in a million years guess that the weak point would be the tube, considering how much trouble I've gone to make that watertight, but that's much more easily solved than tearing at the bolts out of the bottom of Megahab, which is what I was going to have to do if this didn't solve the problem, but it has. I might want to do that anyway, just to be doubly, triply sure, but it does look like the positive pressure from the air compressor is doing the job. Much to my, I don't want to say surprise, I thought it would work. Anyway, there it is with the tube fully submerged. Now let's try the process of decoupling and recoupling it. Well, shit. I don't know if you can see what's happening there, but I'm trying to purge the air from the tunnel, and it's coming out the right side instead because the fitting, the shorter of the two fittings, is not watertight enough. On the upside, this habitat is pressurized, and as I hoped, being under positive pressure prevents any water from coming in through the leak point. I might want to fix that anyway, but it looks like it wouldn't really be necessary. As I expected, positive pressure is enough to keep water out. This is disheartening, but it's only a small setback, and it's clear what we need to do. We just need to get a longer fitting for the right side of the tube, like we already had on the left side, and then we need to slather those fittings with silicone sealant in order to achieve a more watertight seal at either end of the tube. This didn't go perfectly, but it did give me data. It gave me the information I needed as to what has to be done next. And in that sense, it's a success. Here I am once again at the trailer parts store. My beard now almost long enough to put me on a watch list. They did not have the thing with the longer fitting that I needed. They said they'll order one, it'll be in tomorrow, but that's not in time for the video, so that's not much good. I want to get something done today. So when I told them of the issue, they said they had another of these things with the short fitting. And I said, well, what good is that to me? The one that I was using leaks. And they said, well, you shouldn't have any issue with the short fitting as long as you use one of these. And it's a little bit large. I have the trimmers at home. I need to cut the excess metal down to size. But they say as long as I tighten these on there, it should be plenty watertight, and I shouldn't need the longer fitting. I'm going to get the one with the longer fitting anyway, just to have it. I'll have that in time for the next video. So if this doesn't work, I'll still have something to show you. Hopefully this does the trick. If not, I'm not sure what the next step is going to be. These are pretty close to the right size, actually. I'm not going to have to snip off too much excess. A bunch of you were telling me to get these. I listen to you guys. You guys have good ideas. Hello, lab assistant cat. Cat 001. No treat to you. There is no treat. Let this be a lesson to you, not to trust me. Or anyone, really. But you don't know about that. You're a cat. You don't have to pay taxes. You don't need roommates. Well, I guess I'm your roommate, kind of. Boy, I wish I were you right now. Anyway, I swapped out the long fitting for a short one since that's what I have two of. I want it to be symmetrical. And this will make a doubly excellent test of whether or not these things can compensate for the short length of the fittings. Like how tight it actually is. I have requested that the trailer parts store order one of the long fittings just in case this doesn't work out like I hope it will. We'll see if that's even necessary though. But I've got my bases covered if this doesn't turn out to be the silver bullet that I'm hoping. Always have your bases covered. Because otherwise the baseball goblin won't visit your baseball diamond at night and then find the baseballs that you put underneath the markers and give you money. I think that's how that goes. It's just enough space to tighten onto. These might have been intended for use with this type of securing mechanism. I wouldn't be surprised. This wouldn't be the first time I've gone into something not knowing how it's supposed to be done and discovered just by trial and error how you're meant to do it. Something I could have just asked somebody about. Where's the fun in that, though? Can't get interesting scars doing it that way. Here's that. How do I focus? Come on, here. Here we go. It's a nice tight fitting. That ought to do the job. I'll be shocked if that doesn't do the job. Well, fuck my ass. That's all it took to solve this problem? Hose clamps? I remember now, that's what they're called, hose clamps. Even with the short fittings, it's perfectly watertight. The only air is coming out the rim of the lid for the Mega Hab, since it's higher than the one on the smaller habitat. Bubbles were coming out of the smaller habitat earlier, but they don't seem to be. Everything's sufficiently watertight that air is only exiting through the highest point where it can get through a seal, which is exactly how it should be. This is kind of a shockingly good result. I was expecting more troubles, and with everything going wrong in my life right now, I kind of expected this to just be an insoluble problem, but it doesn't look that way. It looks like this, dare I say it, looks like this is a solved problem. Now we attempt the purging. Fingers crossed. First thing we have to do, of course, is flood the tube. By the way, I really got in there on MegaHab with this flashlight through the dome to make sure, doubly, triply sure, and there's no water coming from that bolt. Apparently there's only a micro opening that requires some amount of water pressure to push water in through it. It has not been an issue since I tested these habitats under pressurization. I may still look at it, depending on a couple of different factors. Okay, both gate valves are closed. That's why it's bubbling out of there now. Now I let this flood. You have to uncover both holes for it to flood properly. You can see bubbles coming out and water's coming in through the bottom. If you guys want, I can set up this test under pressurization with the hamsters inside, just so you could see them traversing the tunnel underwater a bit early. It would be unorthodox, but I'd be willing to do it. Let me check the Mega Hab, make sure it's not leaking. Still not leaking, dry as a bone. That's probably the most pleasing outcome of this experiment. Not even the fact that the tube is watertight now, just the fact that Mega Hab is more structurally sound than expected. Some leaks are going to happen. There's always going to be leaks, like that one. That's expected. It's just a matter of how much it leaks and where the leaks are on the structure that matters. Okay, it's almost finished. At least I hope so. It's taking a long fucking time to fill with water. And then I've got this, a second airline from the compressor, as my compressed air source to once again try to purge that tunnel. There it goes, it's almost full. There's probably going to be a couple drops in there no matter what I do after I purge it. That probably can't be helped. Okay, as you can see, the bubbles have stopped. It is now completely full of water. It's hard to see on camera, but it's a lot more obvious in person. This is kind of a bitch to wedge in there. Oh, you can see right away, it's generating a bubble. It's doing perfectly. Bubbles are not coming out of the edges where the hose clamps are like they did before. I can see it. It's purging. It's working. I almost can't believe it. It's working exactly how I originally intended it to. It just took a lot of fucking trial and error to... Okay, all the water has now been purged from the tunnel, and all I have to do is cover that here. And then cover that here. Now we have a pipe full of air, presumably, and I can open these gates. Restoring pressurization to megahab. And I'm going to check inside with a flashlight to make sure that nothing got in there. Still dry as a bone. I'd call that a good outcome. Now the inside of the tube is going to be damp to the touch for the hamsters. There's no avoiding that. But as they go through 2 or 3 times, their fur will brush it dry. It'll just be unpleasant for the first 2 or 3 traversals. However, I can't overstate how pleased I am. This second test went far and away better than anticipated. I can now declare the technical challenge of creating a modular tubing system that is possible to purge while the habitats are underwater without letting air inside, as well as to disconnect them without emitting water, to be solved. Actually, you know what? Fuck it. Merry Christmas. Water only gets deep enough in this tub to submerge the smaller of the 2 habitats, sadly. At least I now have a good idea of what I need the dimensions of my replacement fish tank to be. I need it about the size of a bathtub and taller so that the water level goes above where megahab is. You can see him just chilling in there. Confused as fuck. He doesn't know. This is the first time either of them has been underwater, actually. He's determined to dig out of there. I don't think he'd like what would happen if he did. Here's where the water surface is. He's under there. She, I guess. She's convinced. Why is she convinced that there's something on the other side? Maybe because of the water droplets. Maybe they figure if there's water droplets on this surface, then there's water on the other side. There he is. There's a little bit of water on the bottom just from when I removed the compressed air source after purging the tube. And it was a second or two before I could slip that rubber band onto there. So a little bit of water does get in no matter what I do. This is about as perfect as I can get it though. It's so clear you can't tell, but that's that's submerged. He's not trying to dig at the part on the right that has less condensation. I'd sure like to know what's going through his head right now, other than what the fuck, I'm underwater. Well, there you have it, underwater hamsters. What more could you ask for? That's all for this time. Remember to check out the merchandise on the shelf below this video. There's also a merch shelf on my Twitch. Check out the links in the description for how you can find my Twitter, how you can find my gaming Twitch channel, a 24/7 live stream of the hamster cage, and more. I hope you got a lot out of this. I like to try to teach as I entertain. And if there's one thing that you take away from this video, it's the buttocks. The buttocks.